Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to New Moon. Sorry again for another late update. Iggy and I were having a fight. He needed a bath and he wouldn't go. He's kind of like a 3-year-old like that. But ultimately he's in the tub now. I think taking a nap. He usually does that. I don't put in enough water so that it reaches his nose even if he's laying down flat. Just enough for him to soak. Oh, you have to use warm water. Don't use hot water. And he's an iguana, so it's hard to tell with iguanas, or really any reptiles, if you're giving them a bath, whether or not the water is too hot, because they have no discernible expressions, obviously, that humans could understand. So just keep that in mind. What I do is I like to use slightly hot water, let it cool off for about 7 minutes, and then I'll put him in the tub. Anyway, we are in chapter 24, so just the epilogue after today, and hopefully I will find Eclipse. But if not, please consider maybe letting me play the Telltale game, The Walking Dead, I think is the one that it is. It's very story-driven, and I love The Walking Dead. It's a great show. I understand a lot of people don't like it, and I can understand why. But anyway, Chapter 24, Vote, page 522. He was not pleased. That much was easy to read in his face. But without further argument, he took me in his arms and sprang blithely. I was just thinking about that word the other day, because Growlithe? Would it be Growlithe? I don't know, anyway. From my window, landing without the slightest jolt, like a cat. Have you seen my cats? It was a little bit farther down than I'd imagined. "All right, then," he said, his voice seething with disapproval. "Up you go." He helped me onto his back and took off running. Even after all this time, it felt routine, easy. Evidently, this was something you never forgot, like riding a bicycle. Okay, question about that, real quick, and sorry. When they say you never forget how to ride a bike, do they mean, like, you don't forget what you have to do in order to ride a bike? Or that once you learn how to ride a bike, you will always be able to ride a bike? Because I went 6 months without riding a bike, and when I did, I wasn't able to work. Anyway, just let me know what that expression is supposed to mean, and I'll thank you for it. Where was I? It was so very quiet and dark as he ran through the forest, his breathing slow and even, dark enough that the trees flying past us were nearly invisible, and the only rush of air in my face, gave away our speed. Okay, there we go. The air was damp. It didn't burn my eyes the way the wind in the big plaza had, and that was comforting. As was the night, too, after the terrifying brightness. Like the thick quilt I'd played under as a child, the dark felt familiar and protecting. There's a line like that in the Bible. I remembered that running through the forest like this used to frighten me. That I used to have to close my eyes. It seemed a silly reaction to me now. I kept my eyes wide, my chin resting on his shoulder, my cheek against his neck. The speed was exhilarating, 100 times better than the motorcycle. I turned my face toward him and pressed my lips into the cold stone skin of his neck. "Thank you," he said, as the vague black shapes of trees passed us. "Does that mean you've decided you're awake?" I laughed. The sound was easy, natural, effortless. It sounded right. I feel so bad for Jacob. Not really. More that, either way, I'm not trying to wake up. Not tonight. I'll earn your trust back somehow, he murmured, mostly to himself. If it's my final act. I trust you, I assured him. It's me I don't trust. Explain that, please. He'd slowed to walk, and I could only tell because the wind ceased, and I guessed that we weren't far from the house. In fact, I thought I could make out the sound of the river rushing somewhere close by in the darkness. Well, I struggled to find the right way to phrase it. I don't trust myself to be enough to deserve you. There's nothing about me that could hold you. He stopped and reached around to pull me from his back. His gentle hands did not release me after he'd set me on my feet again. He wrapped his arms tightly around me, hugging me to his chest. "Your hold is permanent and unbreakable," he whispered. "Never doubt that. But how could I not?" "You never did tell me," he murmured. What? What your greatest problem is? I'll give you one guess, I sighed, and reached up to touch the tip of his nose with my index finger. He nodded. I'm worse than the Volturi, he said grimly. I guess I've earned that. I rolled my eyes. The worst the Volturi can do is kill me. He waited with tense eyes. You can leave me, I explained. The Volturi, Victoria, yeah. They're nothing compared to that. Even in the darkness, I could see the anguish twist his face. It reminded me of his expression under Jane's torturous gaze. I felt sick and regretted speaking the truth. Don't, I whispered, touching his face. Don't be sad. He pulled one corner of his mouth up half-heartedly, but the expression didn't touch his eyes. If there was only some way to make you see that I can't leave you, he whispered. Time, I suppose, will be the way to convince you. I liked the idea of time. Okay, I agreed. His face was still tormented. Never mind. I tried to distract him with inconsequentials. So since you're staying, can I have my stuff back? I asked, making my tone as light as I could manage. My attempt worked to an extent. He laughed, but his eyes retained the misery. Your things were never gone, he told me. I knew it was wrong since I promised you peace without reminders. It was stupid and childish, but I wanted to leave something of myself with you. The CD, the pictures, the tickets, they're all under your floorboards. Really? He nodded, seeming slightly cheered by my obvious pleasure in this trivial fact. It wasn't enough to heal all the pain in his face completely. I think, I said slowly, I'm not sure, but I wonder. I think maybe I knew it the whole time. What did you know? I only wanted to take away the agony in his eyes, but as I spoke the words, they sounded truer than I expected they would. That some part of me, my subconscious maybe, never stopped believing that you still cared about, whether I lived or died. That's probably why I was hearing the voices. There was a very deep silence for a moment. Voices? He asked flatly. Yes, just one voice. Yours. It's a long story. The wary look on his face made me wish I hadn't brought that up. Would he think I was crazy, like everyone else? Was everyone else right about that? But at least that expression, the one that made him look like something was burning him, faded. I've got time. His voice was unnaturally even. It's pretty pathetic. He waited. I wasn't sure how to explain. Do you remember what Alice said about extreme sports? He spoke the words without inflection or emphasis. You jumped off a cliff for fun. That's the best I've got. Right. And before that, with the motorcycle. Motorcycle? He asked. I knew his voice well enough to hear something brewing behind the calm. I guess I didn't tell Alice about that part. No. Well, about that. See, I found that when I was doing something dangerous or stupid, I could remember you more clearly, I confessed, feeling completely mental. I could remember how your voice sounded when you were angry. I could hear it, like you were standing right there next to me. Mostly, I tried not to think about you, but this didn't hurt so much. It was like you were protecting me again. Like you didn't want me to be hurt. And, well, I wonder if the reason I could hear you so clearly was because underneath it all, I always knew that you hadn't stopped loving me. Again, as I spoke the words, brought with them a sense of conviction, of rightness. Some deep place inside me recognized the truth. His words came out half strangled. You were risking your life to hear... Shh. Don't speak. Wait, no, that's not it. Never mind. I've always wanted to do that. I interrupted him. Hold on a second. I think I'm having an epiphany here. I thought of that night in Port Angeles when I'd had my first delusion. I'd come up with two options, insanity or wish fulfillment. I'd see no third option. But what if you sincerely believed something was true, but you were dead wrong? I mean, what if you were so stubbornly sure that you were right that you wouldn't even consider the truth? Would the truth be silenced, or would it try to break through? Option 3, Edward loved me. I don't know if it works that way. The bond forged between us was not the one that could be broken by absence, distance, or time. And no matter how much more special or beautiful or brilliant or perfect than me he might be, he was irreversibly altered as I was. As I would always belong to him, so would he always be mine. I see what she's going for. I do, I promise. But it's just not there. Was that what I'd been trying to tell myself? Oh, Bella. Oh, okay, I see. Your epiphany, he asked, his voice uneven and strained. You love me, I marveled. The sense of conviction and rightness washed through me again. Well, at least she recognizes that she used the same phrase. Though his eyes were still anxious, the crooked smile I loved best flashed across his face. Truly, I do. My heart inflated like it was going to crack right through my ribs. It filled my chest and blocked my throat so that I could not speak. He really did want me the way I wanted him, forever. It was only for fear of my soul, for human things he didn't want to take from me, that made him so desperate to leave me mortal. Compared to the fear that he didn't want me, this hurdle, my soul, seemed almost insignificant. He took my face tightly between his cool hands and kissed me until I was so dizzy the forest was spinning. Then he leaned his forehead against mine, and I was not the only one breathing harder than usual. You were better at it than I was, you know, he told me. Better at what? Surviving. You at least made an effort. You got up in the morning, tried to be normal for Charlie, followed the pattern of your life. When I wasn't actively tracking, I was totally useless. I couldn't be around my family. I couldn't be around anyone. I'm embarrassed to admit that I'm more or less curled up into a ball and let the misery have me. Well, okay, I'll accept that. He grinned, sheepish. It was much more pathetic than hearing voices, and of course, you know what, I do that too. I was deeply relieved that he really seemed to understand, comforted that this all made sense to him. At any rate, he wasn't looking at me like I was crazy. He was looking at me like he loved me. Oh dear. I only heard one voice, I corrected him. He laughed and then pulled me tight against his right side and started to lead me forward. I'm just humoring you with this, he motioned broadly with his hand toward the darkness in front of us. As we walked, there was something pale and immense there. The house, I realized. It doesn't matter in the slightest what they say. This affects them now, too. He shrugged indifferently. He led me through the open door into the dark house and flipped the lights on. The room was just as I remembered it. The piano and the white couches and the pale, massive staircase. No dust, no white sheets. That's creepy. Edward called out the names with no more volume than I'd use in regular conversation. Carlisle, Esme, Rosalie, Emmett, Jasper, Alice. There's this one YouTube channel that's now defunct, I guess. But they had a really fun idea. It's called Twilight the Musical. They have like 8 episodes. A few of them were split in half, so there's only about 4. And one of their songs is about the Cullens. And they listed the names as Edward, Emmett, Alice, Jasper, Carlisle, Esme, Rosalie. I love that I can still remember that. It's been so many years since I watched it. But give it a look. I'll try and put a link in the description. Maybe you guys will be fans of them and they can come back one day. Life gets in the way. I understand. This was when I was in high school and when I had friends and was happy. Anyway, what was I doing? They would hear. Carlisle was suddenly standing beside me, as if he'd been there all along. Welcome back, Bella, he smiled. What can we do for you this morning? I imagine due to the hour this is not a purely social visit. I nodded. I'd like to talk to everyone at once, if that's okay, about something important. I couldn't help glancing up at Edward's face as I spoke. His expression was critical, but resigned. When I looked back to Carlisle, he was looking at Edward, too. Of course, Carlisle said. Why don't we talk in the other room? Carlisle led the way through the bright living room, around the corner to the dining room, turning on lights as he went. The walls were white, the ceilings high, like the living room. In the center of the room, under the low-hanging chandelier, was a large, polished, oval table surrounded by 8 chairs. Carlisle held out a chair for me at the head. I'd never seen the Cullens use the dining room table before. It was just a prop. They didn't eat in the house. Well, I mean, obviously. Then again, hey, since they're vegetarian vampires, and I understand the joke, and I am aware that a lot of people complain about that. Wouldn't a better cover be a family of butchers? They could just drain all the animal. I mean, obviously they would rather have hunted their food, and they prefer it to be fresh and warm, but they would cause less damage to the ecosystem that way. Anyway, as soon as I turned to sit in the chair, I saw that we were not alone. Esme had followed Edward, and behind her the rest of the family filed in. Carlyle sat down on my right, and Edward on my left. Everyone else took their seats in silence. Alice was grinning at me, already in on the plot. Emmett and Jasper looked curious, and Rosalie smiled at me tentatively. My answering smile was just as timid. This was going to take some getting used to. Carlyle nodded toward me. The floor is yours. I swallowed. Their gazing eyes made me nervous. Edward took my hand under the table. I peeked at him, but he was watching the others, his face suddenly fierce. Well, I paused. I'm hoping Alice has already told you everything that happened in Volterra. Everything, Alice assured me. I threw her a meaningful look. And on the way? That too, she nodded. Good, I said with relief. Then we're all on the same page. They waited patiently while I tried to order my thoughts. I was going to make a joke, but no, I have that problem too. Where was I? So, I have a problem. I began. Alice promised the Volturi that I would become one of you. They're going to send someone to check, and I'm sure that's a bad thing, something to avoid. And so now this involves all of you. I'm sorry about that. I looked at each one of their beautiful faces, saving the most beautiful for last. Edward's mouth was turned down into a grimace. I like grimace. But if you don't want me, then I'm not going to force myself on you, whether Alice is willing or not. Esme opened her mouth to speak, but I held up one finger to stop her. Please, let me finish. You all know what I want. And I'm sure you know what Edward thinks too. I think the only fair way to decide is for everyone to have a vote. If you decide you don't want me, then I guess I'll go back to Italy alone. I can't have them coming here. My forehead creased as I considered that. There was the faint rumble of a growl in Edward's chest. I ignored him. Taking into account, then, that I won't put any of you in any danger either way, I want you to vote yes or no on the issue of me becoming a vampire. I half smiled on the last word and gestured toward Carlyle to begin. Just a minute, Edward interrupted. I glared at him through narrowed eyes. I do that too. Often for no reason. He raised his eyebrows at me, squeezing my hand. I have something to add before we vote. I sighed. About the danger Belle is referring to, he continued. I don't think we need to be overly anxious. His expression became more animated. He put his free hand on the shining table. I feel like I'm not reading that right. Anyway, and leaned forward. You see, he explained, looking around the table while he spoke, there was more than one reason why I didn't want to shake Aro's hand there at the end. There's something they didn't think of, and I didn't want to clue them in. Which was, Alice prodded. I was sure my expression was just as skeptical as hers. The Volturi are overconfident, and with good reason. When they decide to find someone, it's not really a problem. Do you remember Dimitri? He glanced down at me. I shuddered. He took that as a yes. He finds people. That's his talent. Why they keep him. Now, the whole time we were with any of them, I was picking their brains for anything that might save us, getting as much information as possible. So I saw how Dimitri's talents work. He's a tracker 1,000 times more gifted than James was. His ability is loosely related to what I do, or what Aro does. He catches the flavor? I don't know how to describe it. The tenor of someone's mind, and he follows that. It works over immense distances. But after Aro's little experiments, well, Edward shrugged. You think he won't be able to find me, I said flatly. He was smug, I'm sure of it. He relies totally on that other sense. When it doesn't work with you, they'll all be blind. And how does that solve anything? Quite obviously, Alice will be able to tell when they're planning a visit, and I'll hide you. They'll be helpless, he said with fierce enjoyment. It will be like looking for a piece of straw in a haystack. He and Emmett exchanged a glance and a smirk. This made no sense, but they can find you, I reminded him, and I can take care of myself. Emmett laughed and reached across the table toward his brother, extending a fist. Excellent plan, my brother, he said with enthusiasm. Edward stretched out his arm to smack Emmett's fist with his own. Funny. No, Rosalie hissed. Absolutely not, I agreed. Nice. Jasper's voice was appreciative. Idiots, Alice muttered. I like that. Esme just glared at Edward. I straightened up in my chair, focusing. This was my meeting. All right, then. Edward has offered an alternative for you to consider, I said coolly. Let's vote. I looked toward Edward this time. It would be better to get his opinion out of the way. Do you want me to join your family? His eyes were hard and black as flint. Not that way. You're staying human. Staying human. Is that a show or something? I nodded once, keeping my face businesslike, and then moved on. Alice? Yes. Jasper? Yes, he said, voice grave. I was a little surprised. I hadn't been all sure of his vote, but I suppressed my reaction and moved on. Rosalie? She hesitated, biting down on her full, perfect bottom lip. No. I kept my face blank and turned my head slightly to move on, but she held up both her hands, palms forward. Let me explain, she pleaded. I don't mean that I have any aversion to you as a sister. It's just that this is not the life I would have chosen for myself. I wish there had been someone there to vote no for me. I nodded slowly and then turned to Emmett. Beep, yes, he grinned. We can find some other way to pick a fight with this Dimitri. I was still grimacing at that when I looked at Esme. Yes, of course, Bella. I already think of you as part of the family. Thank you, Esme, I murmured. Can someone please go through all the books, I suppose? I might do that. And count every single time the word murmur or murmured showed up? Huh. As I turned toward Carlyle, I was suddenly nervous. Let's see. Wishing I had asked for his vote first. I was sure that this was the vote that mattered most, the vote that counted more than any majority. Carlyle wasn't looking at me. Edward, he said. No, Edward growled. His jaw was strained tight, his lips curled back from his teeth. It's the only way that makes sense, Carlyle insisted. You've chosen not to live without her, and that doesn't leave me a choice. Edward dropped my hand, shoving away from the table. He stalked out of the room, snarling under his breath. I guess you know my vote, Carlyle sighed. I was still staring after Edward. Thanks, I mumbled. An ear-splitting crash echoed from the other room. I flinched and spoke quickly. That's all I needed. Thank you for wanting to keep me. I feel exactly the same way about all of you. My voice was jagged with emotion by the end. Esme was at my side in a flash, her cold arms around me. Dearest Bella, she breathed. I hugged her back out of the corner of my eye. I noticed Rosalie looking down at the table, and I realized that my words could be construed in two ways. Am I missing something? Let me know down in the comments. Unless they're about to explain what I missed. Anyway. Where was I? Well, Alice, I said when Esme released me, where do you want to do this? Alice stared at me, her eyes widening with terror. No, no, no! Edward roared, charging back into the room. He was in my face before I had time to blink, bending over me, his expression twisted in rage. That's not a good thing. Are you insane? He shouted. Have you utterly lost your mind? I cringed away, my hands over my ears. Bella? Alice interjected with an anxious voice. I don't think I'm ready for that. I'll need to prepare. Wait a minute. You promised, I reminded her, glaring at Edward's arm. I know, but seriously, Bella, I don't have any idea how not to kill you. You can do it, I encouraged. I trust you. Edward snarled in fury. Alice shook her head quickly, looking panicked. Carlyle? I turned to look at him. Edward grabbed my face in his hand, forcing me to look at him. His other hand was out, palmed toward Carlyle. Carlyle ignored that. "I'm able to do it," he answered my question. I wished I could see his expression. "You would be in no danger of me losing control." Sounds good. I hoped he could understand. It was hard to talk clearly the way Edward held my jaw. "Hold on," Edward said between his teeth. "It doesn't have to be now." "There's no reason for it not to be now," I said, the words coming out distorted. "I can think of a few." "Of course you can," I said sourly. "Now let go of me." He freed my face and folded his arms across his chest. "In about 2 hours, Charlie will be here looking for you. I wouldn't put it past him to involve the police." "He is the police." All three of them, but I frowned. This was always the hardest part. Charlie, Renee, now Jacob, too. The people I would lose, the people I would hurt. I wish there was some way that I could be the only one to suffer, but I knew that was impossible. At the same time, I was hurting them more by staying human. Putting Charlie in constant danger through my proximity, putting Jake in worse danger still by drawing his enemies across the land he felt bound to protect. And Renee, I couldn't even risk a visit to see my own mother, for fear of bringing my deadly problems along with me. I was a danger magnet. I'd accepted that about myself. By accepting this, I knew I needed to take care of myself and protect the ones I loved, even if that meant I couldn't be with them. I needed to be strong. "In the interest of remaining inconspicuous," Edward said, still talking through his gritted teeth, but looking at Carlyle now, "I suggest that we put this conversation off, at the very least until Bella finishes high school and moves out of Charlie's house." "That's a reasonable request, Bella," Carlyle pointed out. "I thought about Charlie's reaction when he woke up this morning. If, after all that life had put him through in the last week with Harry's loss, and then I had put him through with my unexplained disappearance, he were to find my bed empty. Charlie deserved better than that. It was just a little more time. Graduation wasn't so far away." I pursed my lips. "I'll consider it." Edward relaxed, his jaw unclenched. "I should probably take you home," he said, more calm now, but clearly in a hurry to get me out of here, just in case Charlie wakes up early. I looked at Carlyle. "After graduation, you have my word." I took a deep breath, smiled, and turned back to Edward. "Okay, you can take me home." Oh, for some reason I thought Iggy was over here. I already put him in the bath. I said that. Edward rushed me out of the house before Carlyle could promise me anything else. He took me out the back so I didn't get to see what was broken in the living room. I want to know now. I'm such a child. It was a quiet trip home. I was feeling triumphant and a little smug. Scared stiff, too, of course, but I tried not to think about that part. It did me no good to worry about the pain, the physical or the emotional, so I wouldn't, not until I absolutely had to. When I got to my house, Edward didn't pause. He dashed up the wall and through my window in half a second. Then he pulled my arms from around his neck and set me on the bed. I thought I had a pretty good idea of what he was thinking, but his expression surprised me. Instead of furious, it was calculating. He paced silently back and forth across my dark room while I watched with growing suspicion. "Whatever you're planning, it's not going to work," I told him. "Shh, I'm thinking." Ugh, I groaned, throwing myself back on the bed and pulling the quilt over my head. #bars. Shady Penguin. There was no sound, but suddenly he was there. He flipped the cover back so he could see me. He was lying next to me, his hand reached up to brush my hair from my cheek. "If you don't mind, I'd much rather you didn't hide your face. I've lived without it for as long as I could stand. Now, tell me something." "What?" I asked, unwilling. "If you could have anything in the world, anything at all, what would it be?" I could feel the skepticism in my eyes. "You?" He shook his head impatiently. "Something you don't already have." I wasn't sure where he was trying to lead me, so I thought carefully before I answered. I came up with something that was both true and probably impossible. I would want Carlyle not to have to do it. I would want you to change me. I watched his reaction warily, expecting more of the fury I'd seen at his house. I was surprised that his expression didn't change. It was still calculating, thoughtful. "What would you be willing to trade for that?" I couldn't believe my ears. I gawked at his composed face and blurted out the answer before I could think about it. Anything. He smiled faintly and then pursed his lips. 5 years? My face twisted into an expression somewhere between chagrin? Chagrin? Let me know how that word is supposed to be pronounced. I know, I could look it up if I really wanted. Wow, 30 minutes? It doesn't feel like it's been that long. Oh, also, sorry for a late upload. Like I said earlier, Iggy and I were having a discussion about whether or not he should take a bath. You said anything. Chagrin and horror. There we go. You said anything, he reminded me. Yes, but you'll use the time to find a way out of it. I have to strike while the iron is hot. Besides, it's just too dangerous to be human. For me, at least. So anything but that. He frowned. 3 years? No. Isn't it worth anything to you at all? I thought about how much I wanted this. Better to keep a poker face, I decided, and not let him know how very much that was. It would give me more leverage. 6 months. He rolled his eyes. Not good enough. 1 year then, and that's my limit. At least give me 2. No way. 19. I'll do. But I'm not going anywhere near 20. If you're staying in your teens forever, then so am I. He thought for a minute. Alright, forget time limits. If you want me to be the one, then you'll just have to meet one condition. Condition? My voice went flat. What condition? His eyes were cautious. He spoke slowly. Marry me first. I stared at him, waiting. Okay, what's the punchline? He sighed. You're wounding my ego, Bella. I just proposed to you, and you think it's a joke. I proposed once. Edward, please, be serious. I am 100% serious. He gazed at me with no hint of humor in his face. Oh, come on, I said, an edge of hysteria in my voice. I'm only 18. Well, I'm nearly 110. I think it's time I settled down. Okay, that's pretty funny. I like that. I mean, they're still not good for each other, but that was pretty funny. I realized I didn't laugh, but anyway. It made my heart giggle. I don't know. That's not a good thing. Oh, great. Now I have a heart murmur. No. I would be so upset. For more reasons than... Never mind. I looked away out the dark window, trying to control the panic before it gave me away. Look, marriage isn't exactly that high on my list of priorities, you know. It was sort of the kiss of death for Renee and Charlie. Interesting choice of words. You know what I mean. He inhaled deeply. Please don't tell me that you're afraid of commitment. His voice was disbelieving, and I understood what he meant. That's not it exactly, I hedged. I'm afraid of Renee. She has some really intense opinions on getting married before you're 30. Because she'd rather you become one of the eternal condemned. Then get married, he laughed darkly. You think you're joking. Bella, if you compare the level of commitment between a marital union as opposed to bartering your soul in exchange for an eternity as a vampire, he shook his head. If you're not brave enough to marry me, then, well, I interrupted. What if I did? What if I told you to take me to Vegas now? Would I be a vampire in 3 days? He smiled, his teeth flashing in the dark. Sure, he said, calling my bluff. I'll go get my car. Dang it, I muttered. I'll give you 18 months. No deal, he said. I like this condition. Fine, I'll have Carlisle do it when I graduate. If that's what you really want, he shrugged, and his smile became absolutely angelic. You're impossible, I groaned. A monster. He chuckled. Is that why you won't marry me? I groaned again. He leaned toward me. His night-dark eyes melted and smoldered and shattered my concentration. Please, Bella, he breathed. I forgot how to breathe for a moment. When I recovered, I shook my head quickly, trying to clear my suddenly clouded mind. Would this have gone better if I had time to get a ring? No, no rings, I nearly shouted. Now you've done it, he whispered. Oops, Charlie's getting up. I'd better leave. Edward said with resignation. My heart stopped beating. He gauged my expression for a second. Would it be childish of me to hide in your closet then? No, I whispered eagerly. Stay, please. Edward smiled and disappeared. I seethed in the darkness as I waited for Charlie to check on me. Edward knew exactly what he was doing, and I was willing to bet that all of the injured surprise was part of the ploy. Of course, I still had the Carlisle option, but now that I knew there was a chance that Edward would change me himself, I wanted it bad. He was such a cheater. My door cracked open. Morning, Dad. Oh, hey, Bella. He sounded embarrassed at getting caught. I didn't know you were awake. Yeah, I've just been waiting for you to wake up so I could take a shower. I started to get up. Hold on, Charlie said, flipping the light on. I blinked in the sudden brightness and carefully kept my eyes away from the closet. Smart. Let's talk for a minute first. I couldn't control my grimace. I'd forgotten to ask Alice for a good excuse. You know you're in trouble. Yeah, I know. I just went about crazy these last 3 days. I come home from Harry's funeral, and you're gone. Jacob could only tell me that you'd run off with Alice Cullen and that he thought you were in trouble. You didn't leave me a number, and you didn't call. I didn't know where you were or when or if you were coming back. Do you have any idea how... He couldn't finish the sentence. He sucked in a sharp breath and moved on. Can you give me one reason why I shouldn't ship you off to Jacksonville this second? My eyes narrowed. So it was going to be threats, was it? Really? That's not a threat. He's genuinely asking her so that he can understand. Then again, she is a teenager, and yeah, anyway. I mean, I guess I was like that too, somewhat. In my defense, though, I really was threatened. I was pointing at the camera, but my finger wasn't on screen. I'm stupid. Two could play at that game. I sat up, pulling the quilt around me. Kind of sounds like my sister back in the day. The older one, not the younger one. Because I won't go. Now, just a minute, young lady. Look, Dad, I accept complete responsibility for my actions, and you have the right to ground me for as long as you want. I will also do all the chores and laundry and dishes until you think I've earned or learned my lesson. And I guess you're within your rights if you want to kick me out too, but that won't make me go back to Florida. That won't make me to go... What? I read that sentence in a way that made sense to me. Let me know if it made sense to you. Well, there are a lot of things I want you to tell me. Wait, no, that came out wrong. Wow, 40 minutes almost. His face turned bright red. He took a few deep breaths before he answered. Would you like to explain where you've been? Ah, crud. There was an emergency. He raised his eyebrows in expectation of my brilliant explanation. I filled my cheeks with air and then blew it out noisily. I don't know what to tell you, Dad. It was mostly a misunderstanding, she said. It got out of hand. He waited with a distrustful expression. See, Alice told Rosalie about me jumping off the cliff. I was scrambling frantically to make this work, to keep it as close to the truth as possible, so that my inability to lie convincingly would not undermine the excuse. But before I could go on, Charlie's expression reminded me that he didn't know anything about the cliff. Major oops. As if I wasn't already toast. I forgot she didn't say that. Then again, this is like the second time they've met since she got back. And that happened. Oh, never mind. I guess I didn't tell you about that. I choked out. It was nothing, just messing around, swimming with Jake. Anyway, Rosalie told Edward and he was upset. She sort of accidentally made it sound like I was trying to kill myself or something. He wouldn't answer his phone, so Alice dragged me to L.A. to explain in person. I shrugged, desperately hoping that he would not be so distracted by my slip that he'd miss the brilliant explanation I provided. Wait a minute. Charlie's face was frozen. Were you trying to kill yourself, Bella? No, of course not. I was just having fun with Jake. Cliff diving. The LaPush kids do it all the time. Like I said, nothing. Charlie's face heated up from frozen to hot with fury. What's it to Edward Cullen anyway, he barked. All this time he just left you dangling without a word. I interrupted him again. Another misunderstanding. His face flushed again. So is he back then? I'm not sure what the exact plan is. I think they all are. He shook his head, the vein in his forehead pulsing. I want you to stay away from him, Bella. I don't trust him. He's rotten for you. I won't let him mess you up like that again. Fine, I said curtly. Charlie rocked back onto his heels. Oh. He scrambled for a second, exhaling loudly in surprise. I thought you were going to be difficult. I am. I stared straight into his eyes. I meant, fine, I'll move out. His eyes bulged, his face turned puce. My resolve wavered as I started to worry about his health. He was no younger than Harry. Dad, I don't want to move out, I said in a softer tone. I love you, and I know you're worried, but you need to trust me on this. And you're going to have to ease up on Edward if you want me to stay. Do you want me to live here or not? That's not fair, Bella. You know what I want to. You know I want you to stay. There we go. Then be nice to Edward because he's going to be where I am. What? Well, I can't really say anything about that. If you knew my family, you'd understand, but I'm not going to go into detail. I said it with confidence. The conviction of my epiphany was still strong. Not under my roof, Charlie stormed. I sighed a heavy sigh. Look, I'm not going to give you any more ultimatums tonight, or I guess it's this morning. Just think about it for a few days, okay? But keep in mind that Edward and I are sort of a package deal, Bella. Think it over, I insisted. And while you're doing that, could you give me some privacy? I really need to shower. Charlie's face was a strange shade of purple, but he left. Slamming the door behind him, I heard him stomp furiously down the stairs. I threw off my quilt, and Edward was already there, sitting in the rocking chair as if he'd been present through the whole conversation. Sorry about that, I whispered. It's not as if I don't deserve far worse, he murmured. Don't start anything with Charlie over me, please. Don't worry about it, I breathed as I gathered up my bathroom things and a set of clean clothes. I will start exactly as much as is necessary, and no more than that. Or are you trying to tell me I have nowhere to go? I widened my eyes with false alarm. You'd have to move in with a house of vampires. That's probably the safest place for someone like me. Besides, I grinned, if Charlie kicks me out, then there's no need for a graduation deadline, is there? His jaw tightened, so eager for eternal... I'm not feeling like I should say that word. Ends with nation. Starts with what beavers make. You know what I meant. What? He muttered. You know you don't really believe that. Oh, don't I? He fumed. No, you don't. He glowered at me, and I started to speak, but I cut him off. There we go. If you really believed that you'd lost your soul, then when I found you in Volterra, you would have realized immediately what was happening, instead of thinking we were both dead together. But you didn't. You said, amazing. Carlyle was right, I reminded him, triumphant. There's hope in you after all. For once, Edward was speechless. So let's just both be hopeful, all right? I suggested. Not that it matters if you stay. I don't need heaven. He got up slowly and came to put his hands on either side of my face and stared into my eyes. Forever, he vowed, still a little staggered. That's all I'm asking for, I said, and stretched up on my toe so that I could press my lips to his. And now I feel uncomfortable. Why did I use that voice? Anyway, sorry that it's a longer video than normal. I say normal, but that was about 25 pages long. Still, you wouldn't think that 3 pages would be 10 minutes. Then again, I didn't start until like 2 minutes in. Plus, there was probably, 3 minutes almost of me, being me. Anyway, so I'll keep looking for Eclipse. We might not have it anymore. It could have been accidentally donated at some point. But maybe I'll pick one up the next time I'm up at Barnes & Noble. Excuse me. So at the latest, I don't have my card. I think I mentioned that fraud and whatnot, and my account was frozen. So I won't be able to pick up a new copy if we don't have Eclipse until next Wednesday. So it might be it might be until then. And even then, it would be next Thursday. Next Thursday. Not this Thursday, but the one after that. A week from this Thursday. There we go. That I'd be able to have a video up of Eclipse. So I'm sorry about that. But, like I said, let me know if maybe playing The Walking Dead would be a nice alternative whilst we wait. Or if I should continue with Lucius. It's been a while since I played any games, really, and I really would like to play some for the channel. I really do need to figure out a good way to divide my time between reading books and playing a couple of games here and there. I have quite a few I do have quite a few books now, and I have a decent number of games. I think about 50 on my computer alone, and with the new graphics card that my friend Ryan gave me, hopefully I can start playing Fallout 4 with them, and you guys can have some fun listening to them, because they are way more fun than me. Him and my good buddy Rob, who's gay. Wait, did I go like that, or what was it like that? I couldn't see. Anyway, until next time. Goodbye, everybody. Sorry